Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the For Evansville podcast and the second episode of our series, The Liturgy of the Neighborhood. Today, our guests are Kelli Ward, the Operations and Outreach Pastor at Renew Christian Church, and Fred Mulfinger, the President of the Lamasco Neighborhood Association, where Renew is located. Today, we're going to be talking about why Renew Christian Church stopped doing their most successful thing and what it looks like for a church to fund people's dreams in the neighborhood. But first, let's talk about the relationship between a church and a neighborhood. Welcome, Kelli and Fred.
Hey, welcome to the For Evansville podcast. Our goal is to advance human flourishing through the church. This podcast is a place to practice some of our core values like listening first and learning from everyone. We'll share stories to help you understand the needs and dreams of our city. We hope you'll be inspired to reimagine your faith as a catalyst for love, justice, and purpose in our city and your neighborhood. Don't just live in Evansville, be for Evansville.
So, Fred, do you want to tell us, tell us about yourself and just your history with the neighborhood?
Gosh, we have been in Evansville now 22 years, the end of last month. I moved here when I got a job with Me Johnson, and when we moved here, both of us, both my wife Kim and I, wanted to buy an old house. But of course, when you move into town, the only choices you have are what's on the market right there and then. And so it happened that there was a house on Wabash Avenue that was put on the market as we were looking. And we walked in and fell in love with it. And for 11 years that I worked at Me Johnson, I walked to work. And I got to walk down Franklin Street. And the best of all was in December when they were playing Christmas music on the outdoor speakers. And the snow was swirling a little bit. It was magic, absolute magic. It was the best time of my life, of my career. Almost immediately, though, the neighborhood, we got involved with the neighborhood, and things were happening in the neighborhood that we felt like we needed to get together to kind of deal with. So that's how the Neighborhood Association came to be. And for most of its life, we were dealing with issues, problems, or opportunities, if you want.
Yeah. Perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And that is why, and so as those things happened and people got involved, the Neighborhood Association chugged along, but as fewer and fewer of those things happened, participation became less and less, and it was getting tougher and tougher to pull people together to kind of be a community. And then COVID hit. And then that was pretty much the end of things. And I cannot tell you how exciting it was to get a call from Kelli a year and a half ago or so.
Yeah.
And have her talk about revitalizing things in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Because it was exactly what we needed. I had reached the point after COVID of thinking, well, I guess it's gone. It's done. It's over. But getting that call from Kelli was just like a spark, which gave me hope again. Gave me hope. And I have to tell you, the other thing I will tell you is that I can't speak with anybody from Renew Church, particularly Kelli, without walking away feeling absolutely uplifted.
Oh, that's amazing.
Absolutely. It is such a wonderful relationship that we have with Renew. They are just such great folks.
Great. I can't wait to dive into that a little bit more later. So, Kelli, why don't you just tell our audience a little bit about Renew and its history in the neighborhood and where it is today?
Sure. So Renew Christian Church has been around for just a little over 2 years. Prior to that, we were a campus of Crossroads Christian Church on the west side.
Okay.
And we kind of started engaging in the Lamasco neighborhood when we realized that, man, hey, we're out here worshiping on the west side, but we hadn't had the opportunity to meet our neighbors. And so I kind of selfishly looked at a map and found the closest park, which was a little park called 11th Avenue. And I took my 4 kids, and we started prayer walking in the neighborhood. We started having cookouts in the neighborhood, building relationships in the neighborhood. And that's kind of how our heart for Lamasco began to bloom. Was just from these opportunities to focus on building relationships with neighbors, friends that were basically a tree line, and a couple businesses were separating us from this beautiful community. And so we jumped in and just kind of followed the Lord in that process. And can you repeat the question?
No, it was just where Renew is. So you answered that. If Renew became its own thing from Crossroads.
Yep. And about 2.5 years ago, Renew was commissioned by Crossroads to become an independent church. Crossroads was incredibly generous and kind and set us up for success. And so we're grateful for that. But one of the things that we're also grateful is that Crossroads encouraged us to follow God's will for our congregation and for our community. And that was largely focused around the Lamasco neighborhood. And so as we left Crossroads, we began to pray and ask the Lord, like, what's next for us? How do we reach, how do we connect with a community that, we have some kind of acquaintance type relationships, some friendships budding, but none of us were outreach experts. None of us knew what steps to take, but we knew we wanted to be present in our neighborhood, and we believed that God brings about transformation, both to our hearts, to our homes, and to our city, right?
Yeah.
And so we searched for that and found a lot of things that just didn't feel like the right opportunity for us until we had a conversation with Community One and learned about their Love Your Neighborhood framework, and learned about the idea of neighborhood revitalization, and started to share resources with organizations in our community who were doing neighborhood revitalization work, and went to our church family and to our board and said, hey, are we ready to make a long-term commitment? Are we ready to put our dollars and our dreams kind of where we say we're focused and where we say God's calling us? And when the answer was yes, we kind of coined it Love Lamasco, because we thought, well, what do we call this? We thought,
it's
well, we
a
don't know.
wonderful alliteration.
Yeah, Love
exactly.
Lamasco. We thought, well, let's just call it what we're doing.
Yeah.
So we're gonna love Lamasco, and then as Fred mentioned, coming out of that, the first step was reaching out to the neighborhood association, and that, in my opinion, was a godsend. It opened opportunities for us to connect, for us to learn from one another, for us to work together, and it's just the start of some really great things. So
Yeah. I think it's important to note that when you said you were getting started, you reached out to Fred, who's Neighborhood Association president. And that's important because one of our values is to listen first and that humble curiosity. And so if you had any advice for churches, as you as well, Fred, like starting that initial, like, okay, we want to be in this neighborhood, we want to commit to this neighborhood, what do you do first? That's always like the first step. And so how would you both answer that?
So we received some coaching and consultation in that process, and we learned the value of listening first. In fact, hopefully later this week, I will submit all of the data that we've collected our first year, maybe even a year and a smidge more, in the formal work of Love Lamasco has been listening to neighbors, listening to stories, learning at the feet of the people who walk the sidewalks and meet us in the parks. And so we've been listening for the last year, and we kind of have a hard and fast rule that we don't do anything without our neighbors. We don't want to imply Renew's dreams and desires. We want to learn from our neighbors, and
I would say that's been very clear from the start, that Renew wasn't coming in saying, this is what you need. Mm-hmm. This is what we think you need. They've spent an awful long time listening to what people think they need or say they need or believe they would like to see in their neighborhood. And that's been part of the extreme value of this, that there's not an agenda here, other than to say, what is your dream for this neighborhood, for the place where you live? And I would say, too, that if you don't like where you live, very little else matters. Mm-hmm. And so we want to understand why you like it here. Yeah. Or if you have some issues with it, are they things that can be worked on? And help bring people along to a place where they love where they live.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. We like to say you can't love a place you can't love something until you know it. And so it's important to start knowing something first before you can get that heart for it. So how has that relationship looked like between you two? Do you meet often, or just kind of share those dreams together? What's that like?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that we are 1 year in to what we believe will be a very long relationship. Renew has drawn the line at, no sooner than 10 years. We're here for 10. and we believe that will be even longer. So as we speak, we're speaking of kind of the jumping off point, really. Yeah. But the question about how we work together, we have all types of meetings and phone calls and emails.
Well, I think actually the more interesting part of this conversation is the long-term work.
Sure.
The slow work. Because I think people like to see those immediate results, and we're finding that that's not as successful long-term. So you actually quit something that was the most successful. Mm-hmm. Why? Why did you do that? And what's been the result of that?
Sure. So prior to our commissioning as Renew Christian Church, while we were still kind of thinking back to those days when we were doing cookouts in the park and prayer walks, we still do, but that was just kind of the seedbed of where we started. We had built some great friendships, acquaintances, and even really kind of rich connections with some neighbors that surrounded one of the 4 beautiful city parks that are located in Lamasco. And COVID came, and like it did for all of us, it kind of shook everything. And so we went into shutdown mode. And as we were coming out of shutdown, we started our worship services back up at the church. Our facilities are very small. And so we didn't necessarily have room to socially distance together. And so we thought, well, hey, there's this park that we love with all these people that we love. Why don't we go to the park and start doing worship there? And what we found was that as we began to worship and have our worship services at 11th Avenue Park, it was highly successful. People were coming back to church. People were driving to the west side of Evansville from Elberfeld, from Illinois, from Mount Vernon, from Poseyville. It was beautiful to see this kind of engagement and this desire to be together and worship. Our attendance went up. Our giving kind of steadied and stabilized, and it was in all honesty, like, to be transparent, like it was fun to talk about, like as a church leader, to be like, hey,
when you're successful
really
in those ways,
yeah, of
course,
going on, and kind of really sort of like we're kind of proud of it, right?
Yeah.
And I hate to say that, and I speak only of myself. I was kind of proud of it to see this moment. But as we continued to worship at the park, we realized that our neighbors, our acquaintances, our friends that we had connected with in previous years weren't coming around as often, or maybe even possibly even avoiding us when we were there, or and we began to wonder why. And we realized that going from building a friendship to just the kind of the intimacy of communion and worship, and we literally took communion in the park, right?
Yeah.
Like those we moved at a pace that wasn't comfortable or natural for our neighbors.
Okay.
And so even though it felt like a natural next step for us, as believers who worship's a part of our everyday life, to just worship in this beautiful outdoor space, it wasn't the comfortable next step for them. And unfortunately, we decided worship in the park had to kind of come to its close, so that we could go back and focus on fostering the relationships with our neighbors, which was what was most important to us. So instead of meeting our own needs, which was space and worship and community with this kind of broader picture of the body of Christ, we had to set that aside and say, okay, that was fun, but it wasn't intentional, and that's not why we're in the park. We're in the park to build relationships. We're in the park to build community and trust and communion with the people who live here around 11th Avenue Park at that point in time, and refocus in on meeting neighbors where they were, instead of coming in with essentially our own agenda and our own plans. That's so
interesting. That's hard. That's hard for a church to stop doing something that brings people in the doors.
Absolutely.
That's probably something people have to wrestle with, especially if, like, well, we're getting more people in the doors, but is it the right type of people?
Yeah. Well, and I think that begs the question of what is important that we're counting. As churches, we count dollars and people attendance, right?
Yeah.
But as we were released as Renew, we believe that transformation was what God wanted to bring. He wanted to bring holistic restoration of our hearts, our homes, and our community. And so if that transformation was what restoration, the work of God, the mission of God, was what we wanted to see succeed, then even though attendance is a easy thing to count, it couldn't be the most important thing that we were counting. So, yeah.
Wow. How did you get your church on board with that?
With Love Lamasco?
With that, it's probably still, it might still be hard. You can speak into that. Is it hard for either your congregation or maybe even let's say elders or leadership board, or how do you transform a mind from going attendance is most important to actually transformation is most important?
Great question. So I know I've been a part of several different church dynamics over the years, and there's a bit of being a new church that we're spoiled with, right?
Yeah.
So I've been part of a 100-year-old church, and, shifting directions, refining your mission and your vision can be very tedious. And as a new congregation, at least for a little bit, and hopefully for a little bit longer, we get to sit in this moment where we can cast vision, not redirect it or change it, right?
Sure.
We can build culture, not have to assess it and bring it into alignment. And so part of the success, I believe, is just kind of being in that moment. But two, in addition to that, I believe that within our church family and our elders, our staff, our leadership, and even in our relationship with Crossroads as they commissioned us, it was built on a deep seedbed of trust.
Right.
And it sometimes, as we sit around and we talk as staff and elders, it kind of blows our minds the amount of trust that there exists between our congregation and us. We've been on a journey together, right? We were launched as a campus. We were commissioned as an independent congregation. Beginning an outreach ministry, assessing and bringing our values and our metrics into alignment with the greatest, what we can at this point in time are trying to move towards for God's mission for us. It's exciting. We have a lot of people who are innovative and like to try new things, and we're patient. So not everybody gets it, not everybody understands, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of trust.
So, Fred, I'd love to hear from you about just your observation of Renew coming into the neighborhood, and what has there been a shift there since they've come?
I think any neighborhood, just because of geography, has little enclaves. Like, I know my neighbors really well and the folks surrounding me really well, but I can go a couple of blocks and I really don't know very many folks there. And I think that's been one of the most beautiful things that has come out of this, is that Renew is consciously, intentionally trying to bring folks throughout the neighborhood together to know who we are, to understand who we are, to support each other. And as I said earlier, the call from Kelli at Renew was a lifeline for a neighborhood association, a neighborhood that was floating along and wasn't really progressing, wasn't moving in any direction, positive or negative. And it was a lifeline. It was a life preserver that I grabbed onto and brought other people to hang on to. And we all understand that you can't change the world overnight. And Renew and Kelli they've made it very clear they're in it for the long haul, and we need to be aware that nothing happens overnight, and nothing that is good can be done instantly. Nothing that's good and lasting and significant. So the core folks that we have actively engaged now get that. We just need to get that kind of sense out to more and more folks. And there is some level of skepticism about a church that comes in to a neighborhood to lift the neighborhood up without saying, come and be a member. There's some skepticism there that we have to overcome. Within a very short time of knowing Kelli, I overcame that immediately. But there is on the part of a lot of folks some skepticism there. And there are folks in the neighborhood too who don't have any kind of church home.
Right.
And so they're a little standoffish when they hear church of any denomination. So there is that to overcome, but that's the world. That's the world we live in.
Do either of you have any specific stories where you've seen somebody either their heart change towards you guys, or any conversations that you've been able to have with people who are skeptical?
Absolutely. I think that, we've gone, a year now of doing pop-ups and events and activities, and whether it was a dumpster day or an Easter egg hunt, our goal in being there was to engage neighbors, hear stories, make connections. And so probably one of the really neat moments in doing our year of listening was we did a pop-up at Castleberry Park. And I think, Fred, it was while you and your wife were out of town. We had burgers and hot dogs, and we try not to walk into situations under the umbrella of Renew, but rather under the umbrella of we, right, us together. And we showed up, and we had met some neighbors. We told them about Love Lamasco. We told them about listening to neighbors and working together for the future of the neighborhood. And
was that a formal thing or informal?
Very informal.
What, like when you say we told people about this, is it more just like you got to know the people there and just mentioned it in conversation? It wasn't like a program.
It wasn't like a program.
Okay.
It was just people sitting around eating a burger and chatting.
Okay.
And hey, love your dog. You live in that house? That's awesome. I'm from that church up there. Oh, how neat. So it was very, very natural, very just like a picnic, really. But in that process, one of the things that we did is we had some team members from our outreach team at Renew that were prepared to use a tool called a SWOT interview, which is four questions. What are the strengths of your neighborhood? What are the weaknesses of your neighborhood? What are the opportunities in your neighborhood? And what are the threats in your neighborhood? And this is one of the tools that we've used over the year to listen intentionally.
Okay.
And so we're having these great conversations. We're getting to know some new people. We're getting to share a little bit of the vision of Love Lamasco. Some of our neighborhood association is there. Some of our church members are there. And at the end of it, we're kind of packing everything up. And you kind of mentioned, like, earlier we were talking about how do you bring people along in this journey. Well, one of the conversations that we had as an outreach team is neighborhood revitalization, is that outreach? Is that the work of the church? Is that evangelism?
Yeah.
And so one of the gentlemen who had helped in kind of leading that conversation saw a family walk towards where we were cooking out and where we were at that point in time packing up. And he said, I'm going to go ask him these questions. And so he goes over and begins to ask the questions, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in your neighborhood? And when he gets to threats, the gentleman said, man, I feel like I can't escape my weaknesses here, and shared a little bit of his story and his struggle with addictions and alcoholism, and was able to connect him with another gentleman in our community that does and is a part of recovery opportunities. He invited him to a meeting, invited him to another meeting. And long story short, our cookout was on Tuesday, and on Sunday morning he had connected with a sponsor, and the sponsor came and said, "Hey, this gentleman that we met at the park wants to get baptized."
Wow.
Okay. And it was through the beauty of the neighborhood. It was, hey, there's a church on the south side of the neighborhood who's having a meeting on Wednesday night. If you want to know about opportunities, meet me there.
Yeah.
And there's another church on the north side of the neighborhood that's having a meeting on Thursday night. If you're serious, meet me there, and let's find you a sponsor. It was just a beautiful picture of multiple organizations in our community, multiple people involved in our community, and how a SWOT interview could be the catalyst of someone experiencing the opportunity to have a relationship with Jesus. And so there are opportunities, and there are ways to build relationships and build connections. And I will say, Fred had mentioned and I appreciate, and I'm incredibly humbled by what you've shared about Renew and the timeliness of connecting with the neighborhood association, but we fully recognize that your open door to us and your willingness to kind of share this vision. And Fred is relentless. He works tirelessly. I don't know how you do all that you do to make sure that that we have access to resources and people and locations. And he dreams with us. And it went from as a church that used to say, hey, what are we going to go do at the park? What are we going to do for our neighbors at the park? That conversation changed to, hey, what are we doing with our neighbors? Yeah. What are we doing with our neighbors in Lamasco? And
I think earlier you asked about how this happened and how somebody could replicate it. Yeah. And I think that almost every neighborhood in the city has some organization, some neighborhood organization. Yeah. And whether they're incredibly active, and there are some which are incredibly active, all the way down to moribund, there's a person, there's somebody in that neighborhood who is active, is willing to step out and become the catalyst for transformation. Mm-hmm. And easy enough to find them through something like United Neighborhoods of Evansville. You can get on their website and you can find the person that you need to talk to. Any church that wants to do that. And yeah, it is important to kind of get a group of folks who choose to share a vision in the neighborhood, who live in the neighborhood. So that would be probably the first thing somebody should do if they were interested in trying to make this something that they can be part of.
Sure. So, Kelli, when you were just talking, you said that story that you shared, which is incredible, of that man. But you had mentioned there's a church here, there's a church here. You have to recognize that Renew is not coming into a neighborhood that has no churches.
Oh, yeah.
And so
I don't know that there's a neighborhood in Evansville.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying. Is like there's churches on every corner, really, it seems like. So coming into a neighborhood, what's the importance of working with other churches and not just kind of being siloed and saying, hey, we're going to work with the neighborhood, but I know you're a year in, so you're young and you probably haven't had a lot of time, but maybe either what's happened so far or what kind of plans do you have in the future?
Oh, golly, just like building relationships with people, and maybe even it's a little more difficult. Building relationships organizationally is important, and it takes time, and it means listening. It means meeting people where they are. We have tried to look for ways to intentionally connect with the different congregations in our neighborhood, and we've seen some of the benefits of that, some participation. From, for instance, St. Boniface is one of the churches in their neighborhood, and they have kind of stepped up and been able to connect with us through Love Lamasco and the Neighborhood Association. We continue to just nurture those relationships. I think a big key, just kind of speaking from my perspective, It's easy when you work at a church and you're thinking about church all the time to kind of think on the lines of like, well, how can we move this forward? How can we progress this? How can we promote this? And one of the neat things about Love Lamasco is that it's not renew forward. That's not the step that we want to take. We want to move neighborhood forward, and so. We try to come towards things as ways that we can promote one another. When we promote something that's going on at Renew, we promote it for all of the churches in the neighborhood. We had an old tradition, not old tradition because we're not that old of a church, but we had a tradition that had gone back about 4 or 5 years of Christmas caroling in the park, and we'd hand out invites to Renew's Christmas services. And we started Love Lamasco, and we had actually just met you, Fred, at that point in time, right? And we were like, it feels weird to go into the neighborhood and just like carol and invite people to our church services when there are these other churches in the neighborhood that we also love. And so we reached out to the other pastors and asked, hey, can we include your information in this invitation? And so looking for ways to kind of bring us all together to chase after the similar goals that we have, and that takes time. It's just like building a friendship. Although I feel like my friendship with Fred was just instant. It doesn't always happen that way.
All our lives, yes.
But building those relationships with those churches are definitely worthwhile, because we believe that just like the other organizations and the businesses and the neighbors that are part of the neighborhood, that those churches will have the opportunity to play a role in bringing, revitalization to the space. So
And that is something that I was just bowled over by.
Okay.
Two Christmases now, a group of carolers will come around the neighborhood and leave a little gift on the front porch or hand it to you if you go out. And it's a list of every church within our boundaries with the details about their holiday Christmas services. And you look at that and you think, they're not promoting themselves. They're not saying, come to our church. They're saying, go somewhere.
Yeah.
Go somewhere. Be part of something. Doesn't matter which church you choose. And that's awfully impressive, and that's awfully selfless too.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I was going to ask you, just pick your brain on seeing the churches in the neighborhood with your own history of being in the neighborhood. Have you seen churches work together at all, or is this kind of a new concept?
I think it's fairly new. I don't think there's ever been, at least to my knowledge, hostility.
Sure.
But many of the churches are inward looking, and they're focused on what their needs are and what they are trying to achieve, and measuring success that way, measuring progress that way. And this is a new way of thinking. It is a new way of coming together. How many years has Renew been doing the quarterly luncheon?
Oh, golly. That goes back before Crossroads West Campus to when that building was a West Side Ministry Center. I think that
over a decade,
was
well
in
over
like
a decade.
2012.
Okay, so almost.
Was that with the pastors coming for lunch?
Yeah.
I was a part of the. That was a long time ago. Yeah.
Quarterly luncheon for West Side pastors and leaders, and
what a neat thing. What a synergistic exercise, you know, to kind of lift each other up and understand that we're all going through the same stuff, and how can we help each other?
I wonder how you would feel about as a neighborhood association hosting things like that. So it's not coming from a church that's hosting, but like a neighborhood association.
We're as we move forward and as we grow in every way, that would be a wonderful thing to do. We a long time ago, when we were very active, we had programs at our neighborhood association meetings, and that kind of got to be almost embarrassing sometimes when we'd have a program and somebody would come to present, and there would be 3 or 4 people at the meeting. So we stopped doing programs. But as we build again, and as we rebuild and become a more cohesive and positive force, then I think that'll happen again, and that would be a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah. I think one of the beautiful things about Love Lamasco is the relationship that exists between not just Fred and myself, but the Neighborhood Association and Renew. That is, and we're watching others kind of come to the table and join us. The West Branch of the Evansville Public Library, we've been able to partner for a couple events.
It's been great, just great.
We've had conversations over the last couple months with business owners and organization leaders, and all part of that year of listening, right?
Yeah.
And one of the neat things is as we come out of this year of listening is going to be the process of beginning to dream about what the strength of these relationships can provide in the future, because I'm completely humbled, Fred, by your kind words, but we recognize that we would be nowhere that we are now as Love Lamasco, and I consider that us together, right? That's we, not one of us or the other. That's sharing resources, sharing relationships, sharing influence, sharing dreams and desires, and that's pretty exciting. So
nothing more powerful than collaboration.
Sure.
And that was so clear at the Christmas event down at the library. Oh, it was magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. And then this Easter egg hunt just this past weekend was just a heart-filling experience.
Yeah.
It really was.
I think that's the beginning of some of those partnerships that'll build, and who knows what will come as the days go forward.
Yeah. Well, speaking of dreams of the neighborhood, you told me a story when last time we were together of funding dreams and these ideas of micro grants. I just want to, these are some of the more practical, like what things are you actually doing? So I want to get to that side because that's new for me, a new concept of partnering with the neighborhood and moving forward. But first though, you do have a good story that I want you to share about that. But when you guys were talking, I just wanted to ask you both why focus on the neighborhood? Why is that your goal rather than getting more bodies in the seats from wherever? Why is the neighborhood important?
For me personally, it's following the example of Jesus. The incarnation of Jesus, that he would leave heaven and come to earth to live amongst us, that he was present with us. He had relationship with us. He walked the same roads that humanity was walking. He experienced the same hardships and struggles, and so it's simply following the example of Jesus to be present, to be a part of, to be with people, to build build opportunities like restoration and revitalization out of deep-seated relationships and trust. For me, and I think I can begin to speak for others at Renew as well. We want to follow Jesus's example in that, and man, we love the neighborhood. Yeah. Right? Like, as you get to know people and you build a relationship with people, that love, that bond, that connection can drive a lot.
Yeah.
When you look at the world today, there are so many things that are just out of control and that we have no control over. And at the very basic, fundamental level of neighborhood, we have a lot of control. We can make such a difference.
Absolutely.
The difference that we can make is out of proportion to the effort that's put into it. Developing relationships, giving people a sense that they belong, that other people care about them, that there's a whole group of folks that really care about you, is what is missing in so many areas of life today. And whether somebody has a church home or not, where you live it's so important to know more than just your immediate neighbors. It's just important. It's just important to know that we're all going through this life together.
Yeah, absolutely. So then about action projects, or those kind of micro grants. That's been really fun. So I need to start by saying that is not a Renew idea.
Sure.
That is a tool of the Love Your Neighborhood framework through Community One, which is their neighborhood revitalization resources.
Sure.
And so we followed their lead, and action projects are kind of like early ways to dream together with neighbors. So, when we started, we were like, hey, let's pursue these big things over a long period of time, and we're going to listen for the first year. And so action projects kind of stir and bring life and give opportunities during those early moments. But in other neighborhoods, they found that, as well as in Lamasco, they're a great catalyst for bringing people along in the work of neighborhood revitalization. So, an action project is an idea that a neighbor has to make a positive impact on the neighborhood.
Okay.
And neighbors can apply for, and it's a super simple application, one page, just a few questions, sharing what their idea is, and they can apply for under kind of the way we've structured it, up to $1,000 to do a project for the neighborhood, or create something that will make a positive impact in the neighborhood, or host an event to bring encouragement to the neighborhood. And so last spring, we did our first round of action projects, and we were able to get money into the hands of neighbors so that they could chase after some dreams that they had for the neighborhood to make a positive impact in Lamasco. And you asked earlier, how do you keep excitement now when this is a long time event?
Right.
Those action projects are kind of an example of how to begin that early dreaming and that early desire to be a part of the work of neighborhood revitalization that will take a long time.
Yeah.
And will take a lot of effort over as the days progress, right?
Right.
And those action projects bring some kind of quick wins and great joy.
Very tangible things.
They
Right.
are.
Yeah.
They are.
So what are some examples of some that have been done?
All right. What was this year?
One of the things that we really found to be a necessity is for our parks is some dog cleanup stations with the little bags.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't any of those in any of our parks, and that was one that a neighbor decided she would like to do, and she went to the Parks Board, and they said, "Whoa, of course!" So many people look at the parks and they want to complain about the maintenance or the Parks Department. They're our parks.
Yeah.
We need to maintain them as well as the Parks Department, and so. People walking their dogs, if they forget to bring a bag or what have you, they're available there. One of the other ones that we really had a great time with was our West Side Porch Festival.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Building on the experiences at Haney's Corner in Lincolnshire, we said we'd like to do this on the West Side. So last year, on a much smaller scale, we brought some bands together and had a front porch festival in September, which was just such a lot of fun.
It was fun.
A lot of fun.
It was fun.
And our neighbor across the street, who is a curator down at the African American Museum, had an idea for a micro gallery.
Okay.
And so she had this little gallery built, kind of like a little library.
The little free libraries?
Yeah, on a post, except it's a gallery. It's a diorama almost.
Okay.
And she has had several already now, exhibits in there. And she has another one coming up in August, I think. Is that right?
Actually, that will be the 4th. So there's one that's I can't remember. She's got it all mapped out though, but some really neat.
And that's kind of like bringing art to the neighborhood of if people maybe don't have access to art or museums or things like that. It's like we're bringing that to the neighborhood and providing that.
And that's the kind of thing. It has sparked conversations about, the little median out in front of your house. Could we put some art there? Could we put a bench that somebody could sit on as they're walking their dog and they want to sit down for a moment? That's the kind of stuff. I just love the tangents that we go off on when those kinds of things happen.
People start dreaming and creativity. You don't realize the amount of creativity people have when they're allowed to dream and see that my dream can be realized.
And even in our neighbor who started the Lamasco micro gallery, they have an Instagram. You can look it up and see the different exhibits. She brings a level of expertise that neither Fred or I have, right?
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say is that's the importance of bringing the neighborhood along, because those neighbors are so valuable. They have so much potential, but maybe nobody's helping them realize it. And so that's like you're just coming along and supporting them in that. But to see, like you said, there's no way it would have come up with the idea of an art gallery, a little free art, instead of a little free library, a little free art gallery. And that's such a beautiful, cool thing.
It is really neat.
I love that.
It is really neat. Yeah. We're pretty excited to, we'll launch our second round of action projects late spring, early summer. And we hope to be able to provide resources for neighbors to continue to dream together. So
that's awesome.
We're looking forward to that. That's fun stuff. So.
Yeah. So if we have anybody listening from the Lamasco neighborhood or a church in the neighborhood or anything like that, how can they get kind of plugged into this?
The easiest way would be to come next week to the meeting.
You might have to do specific dates if they're listening later.
It's the day after the eclipse. It's on the the 9th, Tuesday the 9th at the library at 5:30. In fact, that meeting is actually going to be the place where we explain help me here, the
leadership.
Yeah. So, one of the things that is really important is that we don't just come in and say, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
Which has never been Renew's method. But we do feel we need to get a diverse group of people from the neighborhood to help direct the kinds of things that we do, rather than just listening to a couple folks. So we're trying to build a leadership team that will be able to make decisions and create the path forward for the things that are going to happen, that we intend to have happen in the neighborhood. So, if anyone's listening and they want to be part of that, or even if they just want to hear about it, they should come on Tuesday the 9th, 5:30, Westside Library.
There you go. Okay. You can also go to lovelamasco.com. And we keep the meeting schedule up there, as well as different information about the neighborhood. And there is a Facebook page as well. So,
great.
Called Love Lamasco, where you can find out information too.
All right. Well, I'll put all of this for our listeners and watchers. I'll put all of this in their show notes so that you can have links and access to all of that. Maybe even that SWOT analysis kind of thing, so people can. I like that idea. So. Okay, well, we're going to wrap up with that, but is there any last words of wisdom you would like to give us, or if you could say anything to people who want to be a part of neighborhood work, what would you say?
For me, Fred mentioned earlier collaboration and the benefit of collaboration. And so Renew, we envision ourselves as just like the neighborhood learners in this journey. And we are thankful for organizations like For Evansville and others within our city, Community One, that we partner directly with, that have resources. I don't have to be an expert in neighborhood revitalization, but I have some friends who are. And it's beautiful to be able to share their wisdom, learn from them, and it places us as learners together, right? We're blessed with the opportunity to have some of those resources at our fingertips, because we're a church. We don't know how to do neighborhood revitalization. We don't know how to conduct a year of listening, and I didn't know what a SWAT interview was a year ago. But and I didn't know that the neighborhood association was there if it wasn't for the guidance of other organizations, other Christian leaders that have a heart and a passion for neighborhood revitalization within our city, other nonprofits who are doing it successfully, that we've had the opportunity to sit amongst and learn alongside of. And so collaboration is huge, and just kind of working together, learning from each other is a huge key for Renew. So
great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely that. That's the fundamental thing, it's 1 + 1 is 3. And it doesn't diminish any organization to collaborate. It actually makes everybody stronger. It's a beautiful thing to see as it flowers.
It is.
Well, thank you guys so much for being with us today. I'm just so encouraged by the work that's being done in Lamasco. I can't wait to have you guys on in a couple of years and just see where it's going. So we're all in here for the long haul.
We're excited to see where it's going too.
And we do at For Evansville, we have a neighborhood revitalization network. So it's connecting people like Kelli and Fred into a larger network of all of the neighborhoods trying to work together and kind of troubleshooting and having conversations like these just with each other and just feeling, we just want you guys to feel seen, heard, and help you out. And also we're just extremely encouraged and humbled by hearing the stories and learning from you guys too to make us better. So thank you for the work that you're doing in the neighborhoods and for the city of Evansville.